whatever happens, just keep shoving in the ribeyes. No matter what the choices are, shove in the ribeyes. I use the example of like a bottle of Coca-Cola. I remember people would do this, and you'd have a glass full of Coca-Cola, just a glass, pure glass. And you just pour a pitcher of water into it, and it would just eventually shove all the Coke out, and you just have a glass of pure water. Well, that's how I picture the ribeyes. Just keep shoving in the ribeyes, the good fats, the fatty meats.
Greg, how did you find Carnivore?
Um, well, like many people I've heard, I wasn't looking for it. But my lifestyle and choices, and turning 50, I'm 57, things brought me to my knees. And I found myself on insulin a year ago, walking almost with a cane, partly due to a motorcycle mishap. I just hit a bump too fast, and also realized I'm too old to be riding motorcycles. Got rid of that. But yeah, I ended up just rehabbing from that, and also getting off of Klonopin. So for about a year and a quarter, I've been stepping down on a diazepam taper, and I'm almost through it. I'm just down to the last few milligrams. And that plays into the carnivore journey. But in a very concerted and motivated effort to get off of insulin, I just kept chewing up information upon information, and going from the nerve doctors in Michigan, just several. I found my way to, I think, Lauren Knight Hughes and Lily Kane. Those are my first few kind of fun introductions. And then eventually I saw, like so many people, Michaela Peterson and Jordan Peterson in their videos. I was really touched by her journey and his journey, and how tough that must have been as a parent to watch your child suffer like that. And what a greater purpose that's turned into for so many. In fact, since I've been doing carnivore and lost all the weight and all the visible stuff, when people ask me about it, I'll often just say, hey, check this out. And I'll shoot them the 8-minute Jordan Peterson video. It covers all the basics. And also it has all the typical healings that you hear, from him healing his eyesight, which mine did, his gums coming back, which at first it was tough for me even to eat steak. And a few months later, I can chew into them. But before I go down that road, so about in August, I started getting healthier and more mobile, and I started just devouring YouTube videos, and I ate them as much as I do steaks now. And eventually, I ran into the big docs like Ken Berry and Dr. Anthony Chafee. And man, did I think he was just way too extreme at the time. But over time, I just found myself gently falling down that primrose path that he laid out, and found myself with the best results in the Lion diet, just like Jordan Peterson and his daughter and many others. And I've not been able to be that strict with it. But I do find when I get back into it, it definitely has the best impacts. So the first thing I gave up, of course, was sugar. And I found that actually pretty easy. When you have to do it, it takes about 2 weeks for the cravings to go away. For me, and I've heard that for a lot of people, is a rule of thumb, if there's no cheating. And then the biggest challenge I had was giving up carbohydrates. And I didn't realize how addicted I was until I eliminated all of them. And let's see. So that I started studying in August, started buying steaks the last week of August. So I consider September 1st kind of the beginning of the journey. And in that beginning, I had a lot of fun going to the local butcher and just sampling all the different meats and grilling them and boiling them and sous vide and, in air fryer, all kinds of ways of cooking them. And found what tasted best, what worked best. And sure enough, I arrived in ribeye heaven. And unfortunately for me at the time, I had to have prime because that was the most tender. And I even had the butcher cut them horizontally in half for me. So that way they'd be thinner steaks and very easy to cook in air fryer. But as I started going along, I mean, I got off the insulin. My blood sugar got very even though it's a little high, it's very even. And that was one of the first things I was able to get rid of. I know I got off at least 5 other meds I was on. And I was looking for the list, but it's the typical stuff that everybody says. So from September through December, it was a big experiment, tons of learning. I just wanted to point out that your video asking for help is definitely a part of my journey because of the topic that it covers. At first, I thought Anthony Chaffee's prescription of beef water salt for everything was extreme, and then I found my way there, and I started doing it. But I kept hearing about so many miracles that were fast and profound, and I heard your call recently asking for people who maybe didn't have the most pristine journey, or just or weren't super degreed people. And so it spoke to my heart to jump in on that and volunteer, because that can be a problem with human nature, is we want to compare ourselves to others. And so comparing my journey to their journey, when it went from inspiration into comparison, that became a problem because I was trying to fit into a standard. For example, Anthony Chaffee's in his early 40s and an athlete going into this, and a doctor scientist going into this. And for some reason, I compared myself to him. I thought maybe I was that good looking, but it was just torture trying to go straight into a full hardcore beef water salt where he's at. And part of that is the giving up the carbs. That was a source of energy that I was just been used to for so long. And so breaking up with carbs and getting into ketosis and learning to live on ketones has been a journey. And in that process, I've found myself drinking a whole lot more caffeine. In fact, I had some this morning and I'm regretting it. And each time I do it, I regret that I did it. But I'm just not going to beat myself up over it. I'm just still finding my way. And again, I don't have these amazing numbers of the A1C that people, all of a sudden they go from 11 to 5 within a month or two or a few weeks. That's not my experience. So, but like I said, it's high but steady, and to the point to where I don't need those other medications, including metformin and any insulin needles, anything like that. I've also gotten off of blood pressure medication, and boy, I put them in a tray one day and took a picture and sent it to my brother. And I said, look at all these that I've given up in the last 6 months. Again, very typical stories. It's amazing how consistent the stories are. And I'll just go through mine again one more time. I'll start up top. I can actually feel the fat leaving my head. My hats are more loose now. I know, isn't that funny? And then the eyesight clearing up so much in my right eye. This was my weaker eye. It got stronger. I had to change the prescription for both eyes. And then the gums healing better. When I'm staying in beef water salt, I don't have the nasal congestion, so I sleep better. And I don't have a persistent cough, no cough. And like so many say, no burping, no farting, no GERD, no acid indigestion. And it was fascinating to hear what the scientists you had on said about the actual cause of reflux. But anyway, science aside, I'm just going from what's going on in me. I'm having all these miracles of digestion and a really evenness of energy. Why I brought up diazepam taper in the previous. Each time I would step down, it was difficult. When I got onto carnivore, it just became very easy. I mean, a little rocky, but just so easy, and very much impressing the clinician I'm working with on that.
So can you paint a bit of a picture about that? Like what is the I've never taken any, so I'm just trying to understand like what's the difficulty stepping down? Is it like a withdrawal symptom or something?
Mm. Well, diazepam is the generic name for Valium, and it's in the class of drugs called benzodiazepines. And the main receptor site they tag is GABA, which is what alcohol tags, which I drank too much alcohol. So I got onto Klonopin and took that for 8 years. And it stopped working. And I upped the dose and it stopped working. I didn't know, I don't think my doctor knew, that 1 Klonopin equals 20 Valium. 1 milligram of Klonopin is 20 milligrams of Valium. I was taking 5 a day for 8 years. So getting off of that's too crazy. So I went to a special clinic here in Denver called Gallus that chemically brought me down safely so it wouldn't do brain damage to a certain level. And what they do there is they immediately switch you off of Klonopin because it's just too weird, the come down, the withdrawal step downs. And so Valium's a much more straight taper. And so once they got me down to a certain level, about a third of that or 2/3 of that, then I could go on about every 3 weeks. We take off some of it. But here's the interesting part. When I was first coming off it, I was also first on all the other meds, including insulin. And so it was very difficult to find out what was doing what to me, but I was not happy. And so each step down on the Valium taper, if you can imagine the reason that you would take it, it's taking that away from you. So if you took it to relax or have less anxiety, then your body levels out, and then they take some away, you drop down until it's amazing to watch, but the brain recovers, and now this is normal. But when you step down, think of a reason anybody would drink a glass of wine or take a Valium to relax. This is the anti-relax. So that messes up cognitive function. And I play chess with my brother Dave 5 days a week. And that was the real test. Was we'd play chess and he could tell, and he'd say, "Oh, have you stepped down recently?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I couldn't beat him. I mean, we're even all the time, like our whole lives. And so, yeah, then as the brain would catch back up, boom, I could start at least trading victories, if not having a streak of victories. And it was just amazing to watch the brain level back up every time. But when you're stepping down at first, they're small, they're increments. The ratio, the percentage of the overall step down is smaller. But now that I'm at the tail end, the steps are bigger. For example, if I'm down to 4 milligrams and I take off a milligram, that's a 30%, or I don't know how you look at it, 25% drop. But that's huge compared to what I used to do. And it used to bug the heck out of me. Before, I'd be anxious and nervous and things. I couldn't do this, that's for sure. I'd be too nervous for that. So the nice thing is that once I hit carnivore and started getting fat adapted, I noticed then in particular about a month in, but like almost right away probably, the step downs just didn't have the same impact. And I've heard a lot of people talk about anxiety and depression with the carnivore and how much more even it makes you feel. And well, some might consider that boring. And especially depending on the addictive behaviors that you're into, snacking and watching TV. That is such an ingrained habit, and you're getting a dopamine hit if you're eating highly processed carbs and or ice cream, whatever, and you're getting another dopamine hit by watching TV, and depending on what you watch on TV. So that's been a quiet, not so obvious as pounds dropping off experience that I've been having. It's just made that whole process so much easier. And I could actually, if I had to, I could drop it right away. It just wouldn't be very comfortable. And the idea is to do it so you don't. And this is probably a good message to put out there. Anybody who's anxious to get off their meds and don't want to take anything, exogenous. I've done some quitting things before. And if you do it too fast, it's really you saying to yourself, you don't want to succeed. So the commitment to success is doing these things gently. Like I said before to you, as we get older, these movements have to be more gentle. And whatever happens, just keep shoving in the ribeyes. No matter what the choices are, shove in the ribeyes. I use the example of like a bottle of Coca-Cola. I remember people would do this, and you'd have a glass full of Coca-Cola, just a glass, pure glass. And you just pour a pitcher of water into it, and it would just eventually shove all the Coke out, and you just have a glass of pure water. Well, that's how I picture the ribeyes. Just keep shoving in the ribeyes, the good fats, the fatty meats, fish, whatever, whatever looks good in the meat section. Have it, try it, see what works for you. And that's what I've been doing, is having a good time at the butchers, trying everything they have and narrowing it down to what works best for me and continuing to have these healings. And one of the strange parts is getting into all the measuring. There's a part scientist in me. And I measure ketones, I'd measure blood sugar. And there's a point where you find out that the CGM runs higher than a blood prick. There's various reasons for that, but on average, it's a percentage higher. And then, you should have higher blood sugar when you wake up. That's how you wake up in the morning. And higher blood sugar when you go to exercise. That's natural. But the liver produces all the blood sugar, all the glucose that we need. Assuming that the liver is healthy. And I don't even know. These are questions I would ask about metabolic syndrome. And gosh, I hope I'm not getting off too much here. But back to the measuring too much, there's things you can't measure. And in the things that you can might indicate they don't take all the factors into place. So I've had to kind of quit measuring for a while recently, because the results are there. The healings are happening. I shouldn't be getting better eyesight if my blood sugar is going south. Just things and how I'm feeling in my body. The only thing is that, sometimes, and I don't work out better on caffeine. It's just not true. It's just that morning hump that I've just been impatient with. But the key is to not be hard on myself for finding that part. And why I bring up Anthony again is that I think a lot of people come into this in their 50s. Some of the things I'm rehabbing in my shoulder and in my scapula, wrist, elbow, all on his right side, is because I was an athlete when I was younger. So every time I threw a baseball, softball, football, skipped rocks, whatever I was throwing, always very strong on the right side, batting too. And so I've found, and the people tell me when my other healers, that in your 50s, whatever was holding you together just starts to, the testosterone goes down, the growth hormone goes down. And so the things that were holding all these imbalances in place start to the cracks begin to show. And so that's why I think so many come into this in their 50s. And that's why I'm always enjoying watching people in their 50s. Like, I love that guest you had on, Todd. Boy, was he a fireball. Just loved him. And pretty much everything he was talking about, I was like, yes, I'm doing that. Yes, I do that too. And to see how just extemporaneous and enthusiastic he was. And he's just a little further down the road than me in here. And so I'm so inspired by that. And why keep watching videos? When the prescription I hear over and over, like Anthony Chafee say, all you need is fatty meats, water, and salt. I mean, that's the ultimate prescription. But we all kind of have a different starting point in our ways to get there. And I think the most important message, if I was to give someone, including myself, is that whatever it takes to keep you on the track. If you need a piece of chocolate cake, go eat it. Go find out what happens. But keep stuffing in those ribeyes. Just keep going there, and eventually, that just becomes it's the only thing that makes sense to me right now, as far as what I desire to put in my body.
Yeah. That that thing about having a bit of chocolate cake, actually, um, uh, you kind of alluded to this at the beginning, like, don't not to beat yourself up about stuff, right? And I think it's important that it is important not to beat yourself up. And if you have that chocolate cake, it's actually ends up being a good thing because it'll remind you of, oh, that's what it does to me. That's how I feel after eating it. Yeah, I don't feel good. And it's not worth those 5 seconds of mouth pleasure.
That is one of the, I don't know how to put it. I'd almost want to say spiritual lessons here is trading in the temporal for something temporary for something that's going to last longer. So, yes, like that moment on the hips forever, or moment on the lips forever on the hips. Yeah, that's more of a vanity thing, but just how do I feel? And choosing not to feel the buzz. You can't get a buzz on a steak. You can just feel really good. And but all the buzzes come from plants, whether it's coffee or cocaine or wine or opium. All that comes from plants. You can't do it. The only way you can smoke a meat is in a smoker. But one of the other effects of eating this way, that I had sourdough toast the other day. Immediately, I can feel a stickiness in my cells, and I didn't notice that before. But there's so much more, and you can't disconnect these. The fat and the bad fat, the bad water, and old proteins that have burned out of my system. There's such a spaciousness now. So when I'm in the presence of people or situations that might have annoyed me, it's because I was already running at the annoyance level inside my cells, and a million billion cells that are itchy and annoyed add up to an itchy and annoyed me. And then I may not have the best conversation or solution to whatever the situation is. And so now, it may not reflect in the video, but in most circumstances, there's just so much more chill and patience to hear what someone has to say. Yeah, I guess the way to describe it is spaciousness. And I remember the first time I started to notice this was when my mom got cancer. And she was one of the first people to be vegetarian and serving us. We were the lab rats. We would get Beeler broth and carrot burgers, and her family members that were all smoking and drinking were just teasing her about what she was doing. She was trying to be healthy, God bless her, and just loading in all this vegetable stuff. Eventually, when she got the cancer, she saw a guy who helped people heal from cancer using vitamin IVs. And they're very specific to get the cancer on the run, so it would coalesce into her breast to where he could actually remove it. But it was B17, but it was also just a massive amount of vitamins, minerals, and controversially food grade hydrogen peroxide. Well, I went and tried one of these out, and I had the flu. I'm in my 30s. I had just terrible flu. In the middle of a 2-week flu everyone was getting. I don't even remember people doing this anymore. And it was like day 4, and I wanted to break the appointment. I was like, I'm going to go in there. And I got hooked up to this vitamin IV, and 45 minutes later, that thing was gone. I was out of there. And I remember just this smile coming on my face, and that's when I realized how nutritionally fulfilled I was from this megadose IV. And I was like, because I was big time into vitamins and studying all that stuff. And I was like, Jesus, there's no way we can get enough plants in the the phytonutrients and the phytochemicals and all the stuff, the antioxidants and all the stuff that you get from all the foods, you can't even digest it all, what you would really need. In fact, a lot of times watching YouTubes, I would ask GPT to double check some of the things that they would say, and it kept pushing back with this balanced diet idea. And so I asked it to send me or create for me an image of an actual balanced diet of all these things it says that we need every day. And I'll send you the picture of this. And I said, go ahead and go outside the plate, make it a plate, put everything on there you think we need to eat in a day, because I wanted to see how big that plate was going to be. It was enormous. And it went out to the corners and threw in the extra sage and, all the herbs and berries and other things that you would need. And by its own admission, that's insane. You can't get all that. But the closest thing I have ever experienced was this IV. And that's what was depressing, because I was like, how often you got to, you're going to pee most of this out within a few hours. So that was the beginning of me realizing how, at a cellular level, billion trillion cells, if they're actually being fed for the first time or simultaneously, there's this ease of being. And I've been through years of therapy, and man, it's very circular. Without this kind of transformation, it's a whole different starting point. I'm not saying get rid of that IF for now, but take all the sting out of all the cells and be fully nutritionally balanced in a way. Only the body does balancing. And just giving up the idea that I think I know what all this stuff's about. And I think it really takes an open mind and a little desperation, or should we say motivation, to be willing to break through the brainwashing of the cultural norms.
Yeah. So having broken through that, how have you been eating day to day since September 1?
September 1, for the next 3 months, I hung on to, I would go and eat various kinds of red meats. I pretty much stuck to the ruminant animals. My favorite just happened to be cow. And I had to be careful because of chewing for my gums. So, but all that's healed. And now, well, let's just slow down. Sorry. So September through December, one of the things I noticed in giving up my carb addiction was when I really had that feeling in the evening and I still wanted to sit down and watch TV and kind of eat something, my big cheat was it always had to be non-fat. I hated that. But sugar-free non-fat yogurt that's flavored, naturally flavored. I had no idea how many carbs that was versus plain yogurt. But that was my cheat. And I was really missing crunch in my life. I wanted crunch to go with the dip in the sweet cream. And a friend of mine pointed out, hey, what about pork rinds? So my big cheat for a while was at night in the evening, pork rinds with fat-free, sweet, non-sweet, naturally sweetened yogurt, which I would, trying to be a good carnivore guy, pour heavy cream into to give it the fat to go with all the 20 grams of protein that were supposed to be in there. That was like, I would do everything carnivore but that. And then eventually I finally realized what I was doing with that. And in December is when I gave up all that stuff and I went just pure carnivore. And I would get these odd cravings once a week for lobster. And some say that was for iodine. I don't know. All I know is that my body was more trustworthy. So when it said get lobster, I just go get lobster. And from December, so I was having all these little healings going on as I kept my cheats in. It's all right. Did that every night for a while until eventually I was starting to lose my taste for it. And like right on December 1st, I went full on carnivore. And that's when the weight just started coming off. So I think I primed for a couple of months without knowing that's what priming was. And then I lost 30 pounds in 3 months after that. And that's when everyone was like, what are you doing? So, and then it stopped. It like leveled out. I was 215 and it leveled out at 188. So.
So during that time, like what were you eating? You were eating 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day?
Oh, surprisingly, I very naturally went to 2 meals a day. It's actually when I'm eating, my favorite, which is ribeye, uh, it it's really amazing. You do get tired of chewing it. That's when it's time to stop. And then 5, 6 hours later, when I'm hungry again, like barely hungry again, it tastes amazing. And then by the time I'm done, it's done. I'm done tasting it. It just, I mean, every day, every day, every day. It's wonderful and then boring. Wonderful and then boring. And so, yeah, it just tastes great and so satisfying at twice a day. So I'm trying to put on more weight now. I'm trying to get more collagen back in because when I walk on the ground, the bones in my feet don't have a lot of cushion. Same with sitting down. There's not a lot of cushion there either. So it's been pretty rapid, the weight loss. And I've tried to lose this weight for 20 years and it came off in a couple of months. Just crazy.
It's crazy, you think, "I've tried to lose this for 20 years, and it feels like it's all come off in the last 20 minutes." It's pretty amazing. Yeah, so, if you're giving advice to someone about getting started with carnivore, um, what would be the main things you would tell them to do?
Uh, get informed. Watch you and the type of guests that you have, and check out some of the other YouTubers that are great. You'll find your way when the student's ready. The teacher appears. Um, I've got a couple of friends that I've sent a couple video to, and they're slightly open-minded. They're still arguing for the other because they saw that twin study, and I can't argue with them scientifically, but I can just go, Dr. Chafee, or you don't have an appendix. So, I mean, you don't use an appendix, it's vestigial. But I also say, well, just start practicing with what looks good to you. Go to the butcher, go to the meat X section of the store, go to a restaurant. And if seafood's calling you, do some seafood. If steaks are calling, go for steaks. Hamburgers, just no buns, just the meat. Who cares? But just start with what you enjoy and just start again, just filling in the good water. Just stuff that in and pay attention to when other things you eat, how they affect you. And be open to the idea, like me, if you're interested in how I got to where I'm at with it. It was through being open-minded and giving it a chance to it's an elimination diet in one sense. Start with eliminating all the things one by one, though, gently. And if you have to, like I said, if you have to cheat, whatever it takes to keep you moving forward towards animal based. And then from there, you may find yourself sliding down the place to where all of a sudden Anthony Chafee's not extreme. He's right on the money. And that was just too far from my mind when I started this. I couldn't even conceive of that. And it just became a natural occurrence. And just pay attention. Just be, if anything, like you hear everybody say, they don't care if you're a vegan or a carnivore. By going in either path, you're going to get more conscious about what you're putting in your body, and then keep feeding yourself, your mind. Keep feeling, because there's so many things. I'm like, well, if the prescription is beef, water, salt, why do we keep watching videos? Why do we keep asking questions? Well, because we have to be reminded every day, and especially when you're shifting a thought system, you've got to feed the thought system as much as the belly. Otherwise, it's just too easy to get back, and I can't afford to.
Yeah, nice advice. So, Greg, if people want to reach out to you, do you have a YouTube or an Instagram or anything?
Then the way to reach out to me would be courseteacher@gmail.com.
Course teacher. Okay.
It's just the easiest one to remember.
Sure. I'll put that in the show notes. Appreciate that. And Greg, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dave.